Trevor's unavailable right now, and rather than sit around waiting for him to return, I'm heading out on my own for a series of shorter conversations with authors, creators, and other interesting people. Think of it as a typical no-win scenario episode, just with fewer arguments, less supervision, and no Trevor to stop me. Welcome to No Win Scenario presents Don's Away Mission. And don't worry, Trevor will be back soon.
I haven't listened to anything you've said in the last 20 seconds.
Damn it, Trevor. We had a shtick.
Line.
Two friends who hate each other.
Rude.
Talking science fiction.
It has become this cultural phenomenon.
Along with some special guests.
I appreciate what Star Trek did to me.
I would love to have this book get banned.
That wasn't acting. That was real.
Do you know what our YouTube channel is?
Absolutely not.
No win scenario.
With Trevor and Don.
Okay, we're not doing that.
Boom.
Hi, everyone. Our guest today is Jon Land, the New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of around 70 books. We'll never know, but we're somewhere around 70 books, who's best known for his award-winning thrillers, including the Texas Ranger Caitlin Strong series. Jon has also continued 2 iconic mystery franchises, writing 6 Murder, She Wrote novels and 2 books in Margaret Truman's Capital Crime series. His sci-fi work includes The Rising and Blood Moon, co-written with Heather Graham, as well as the brand new, very new, right, Jon? Like, very recently released.
Which one was that?
Icefall. I'm talking about Ice. You wrote so many books. What? Yesterday, exactly. This man writes so many books. Don't know which the latest one is, and that makes a lot of sense. We'll get to that. He's done not whatever. You got a lot to talk about, so let's get right into it. Jon, thank you so much for joining No Win Scenario. So, almost 70 books across a bunch of different genres. You know, at this point in your career, what makes an idea feel worthy of turning it into a book? Is this just an obsession now to just create?
I thought I'd been asked every question possible in over my 70 books and 50 years in the 45 years in the business. Never been asked that one. What makes an idea worthy is seeing there's something that I can bring to it that hasn't been done before, or something that, even more important, that gets me excited, that strokes my that stokes my passion. If I'm not excited, I can't expect the reader to be excited. So I need to love what I'm writing, so the reader will love what they're reading. I get a kick out of writers who don't like their own work. I love my own work. It's all different because I'm in so many different genres, but I think the key is, for the bulk of what I do, which is fiction, thrillers, but also narrative nonfiction, it's to know the story you're telling. Because at heart, Don, all writers are storytellers first, writers second. If you're a writer first, I'm not sure you're in the right area, because you have to be able to tell a story in order to write a story.
I love that. There's a lot to unpack there. It hits home for me because I don't know how you wrote so many books, because it took me like 15 years to write my one novel that I just released. But I never wanted to be an author, a novelist. It was because I had a story to tell, and I had to find the best way. And I navigated doing it through film and television and anthology, and then ended up with the novel. And I had to write the novel because nobody else was telling the story. So I really appreciate what you had to say. I will push back on one thing. And there's a lot I want to talk about what you said. I remember when I was in graduate school for music composition, of all things, I remember this feeling that we all had was that we would work on a big piece. And by the time it was performed, we didn't hate it, but we kind of hated it because we had learned so much in the process of creating and editing and practicing and all this, that we thought we were better and would create something better going forward than when we started that journey. But you don't buy that.
Well, I do, because you're talking about a different medium. Music, you compose music, someone else plays it. That's if I'm interpreting you correctly, you're composing.
Possibly, yeah.
There isn't when you write a thriller, when you write a book like Icefall, my latest, no one else, you're not relying on anyone else to interpret or reimagine what you've done. You create the final product. I think that's why, as a screenwriter, I love writing screenplays. I've only had one produced. It was a wonderful experience. But in the other films I've had that have come close, it isn't you. It's a team. It's a collaborative effort. It's an entirely different process. Music, film, books. Of course, you know what they say about the music industry? It was invented to make the movie business look good. So I think books are probably the most civilized, but they all come with their own creative challenges. But what they have in common is you are delivering entertainment. You are delivering a medium that you hope either the reader, the viewer, or the audience, the listener, will enjoy and interpret the way you wanted them to see, to feel what it is you were trying to get across. I think in books, you have the story or you don't. In movies, it's there or it's not. In music, I admire you. I envy you because music is so subjective compared to movies and books in terms of entertainment. So
Maybe that's because of the ease of creation, right? I mean, it's a lot harder to get a novel out there. It's a lot harder to get a movie made. Now, AI is a whole thing, in 20 years, and everyone can make a movie with the touch of a button in AI. Maybe we get flooded the way that people can flood the music world or people's listening choices. So maybe there's something about distribution there too. But what one thing you said was about you got to love the story and your audience so that your audience will love it. Is there ever I love this story, but how the hell do I know if my audience will like it or not? Is there ever that sort of questioning, or at this point in your career, it doesn't matter? And it's like, at what point do you get over that imposter syndrome or doubt?
you never get over it because it's your primary job. It's what you're trying to do. I'll tell you, Don, I don't tell this story often, don't have the opportunity to tell it often, but when I think about what made me a writer, how I learned to write, the first thing I talk about is being a summer camp counselor in my teens and early 20s and even later, telling stories around a campfire in the 80s and 90s with an audience of kids. And it gives you the immediate, when you lose your audience, when you're telling a story out loud. And here's the thing. I'm a ham, so I love telling stories. And I would tell old Twilight Zones and old Alfred Hitchcocks and Stephen King books. And a lot of times I'd remember the beginning and the end, but I wouldn't remember the middle. So I'd have to create and interpret it. But what I learned from oral storytelling at summer camp, around a campfire in a bunk, but mostly around a campfire. Why? Because you can immediately see not only when you've got the audience, you can see when you lose them. You can see their vision wandering. When they're all looking at you, you've got them. And you need to maintain. And what I've tried to do, and what I've been able to do, at least my goal, is to feel that same way about the audience that I'm not going to be in front of. When I write a book, it's me and it's that kid at the campfire. I'm writing to that same kid, and if he's enjoying the story as much as I'm enjoying listening to the story, as much as I'm enjoying telling it, then I've got him or her. And the same thing is true of a book. The imagination, Don, doesn't age. Our conscious minds, we mature. Our imagination doesn't. We're still the 8-year-old kid who loves Disney movies, or the 4-year-old kid who can watch the same film over and over again. The first movie I ever saw was the original 101 Dalmatians in a theater. And I think that every villain I've ever created is another version of Cruella de Vil. Is there ever
Get
been a
out,
better
really?
in history? Go back and just watch that old version of 101 Dalmatians. The storytelling is perfect. And the other thing, when I think about influences on me,
Yeah.
when I was 7, 8, 9 years old, 10, my father would take me to the old Low State Cinema here in Providence, Rhode Island, because the James Bond movies would come back every 6 months or so as double features. And I love those. I've probably seen those films as a kid 15, 20, 25 times. When they came back, my poor father, whether it be Goldfinger and Thunderball, Dr. No, and From Russia with Love, the Sean Connery films, because he's really the only Bond. There are no other Bonds, in my opinion. So I think the structure of my writing, the MacGuffin, the big thing that everybody's after, the high concept, all goes back to being that little kid in the darkness watching James Bond. How much I've stolen from those movies and those books, because I did read them as well. So kind of a long answer to a short question.
It's a great answer. And you know, because inspiration, it's so interesting to hear from people about where they get inspired and what they love. And that when you go back to the campfire, you know, it makes sense why you wrote so many thrillers, because you had that visceral experience, and then you want to, it seems like in your writing, you want to recreate that for the audience. You want to be there. Um, Number one, is it challenging not to see people's reactions as a novelist? And number two, how do you sort of then transition, or not transition, but now move into more sci-fi with Icefall? So, you know, let's start with that first part. Like, you know, you don't get that same reaction unless you're watching someone read your book, right? So, like, do you feel like you're missing out on that?
Principles are the same. And the first person I'm trying to tell my story to is myself. So if it works on me, I know it's going to work on the reader. I don't outline. I'm a pantser, and the best stuff I come up with was not in the original idea that I had in my head. So I feel that if I don't know what's going to happen next, that's why I don't outline. The reader can't know what's going to happen next. All my chapters begin with hooks, often dialogue. All my chapters end with cliffhangers. I think the two greatest words of advice to a writer were spoken by none other than Homer, whose work has been adapted into a movie that's going to make $5 billion. The Odyssey,
Just a
right?
few days.
And
Now,
he's not
yeah.
getting any royalties on it, Don. Homer ain't getting paid, okay?
They're not going to polish the coffin.
Too bad. But Homer coined the best advice any writer could ever get. The words immedias, in the midst. Don't start at the beginning. When you get into a scene, start in the middle of the scene. You can always go back and say what happened. So often, I'll read, well, I used to. I try to avoid it like the plague now. But a new writer will ask me to read the first 100 pages of their book, or I'll agree to. And so often, I'll say, you know what? You know when you grab me? Chapter 4. 20,000, 5, 7,000, 8,000 words into the book. So you know what you're going to do in your rewrite? That's going to become chapter 1. That's where a book begins is not on page 1. A book begins not on page numbers. It begins when the reader is grabbed. When it becomes where where the writer reaches out and drags them into the story. You have no time in this day and age as a writer, with so many other options of entertainment for people, so many other great authors they could be reading. I'll tell you, I have the Jon Land rule. What's the Jon Land rule? Well, authors do readings, and I've been stuck doing a few of them, and they pick out their favorite page. Well, goddamn it, of course it's going to be good. You picked it out. That's not fair. You know what I do? I look out the audience. I say, somebody yell out a number. 8.
Really?
8. And I read that page. Because the mark of
Wow.
story in writing, a thriller, because to me, every great story is a thriller. The Iliad and the Odyssey is a thriller. Some of
Yeah.
Dickens' best work is a thriller. Huckle Finn is a thriller. Moby Dick is a thriller. All the, the James Fenimore Cooper, Natty Bumppo novels were all thrillers. And the mark of a great thriller, a great story, is that you can open to any page at random, read that page, and in a perfect world, which I live in my writing, it should make you wonder, wow, I've got to go on, or I've got to go back. I've got to see how I got here. So I tell people, how do I know if I'm going to like your book? Here it is. Take Icefall. You know what? Download a sample. You get about 25, 30 pages on Kindle. Don't start it. Go to your Kindle sample and just go, okay, I'm going to go to page 14. Hopefully it's not blank, because then I'm screwed. And read page 14. And if you like page 14, or if page 17 is your favorite number, buy the book. If you don't like 14, 17, 8, whatever you open to, don't buy the book. That's my challenge to people. If you want to know if you should read me, that's how, or anybody who writes in my genre, or because it's entertainment. You name the book that your favorite book, and I'll tell you why it's a thriller if I know it. So, but that's another.
I love it. I mean, that's an amazing. I'm gonna definitely start trying that out. And I think what you said about, going to chapter 4 to where the story is for most people, it's a really important lesson, because I know my colleagues. So I teach part time at Tufts University in film and media, and the screenwriting professors are always telling the students, start as the scene as late as start as late as you can in the story. And with my film students on production side who are trying to just make a story, I'm like, if I see someone waking up, getting their clothes on, brushing their teeth one more time, you're all going to fail. I'm like, get to the story, get to the, and I don't want to plug my own book, but literally my book, I had this issue. I don't know if you can see, but the very first page, can you read
Move it a
that?
little way. Move it this way. Okay, there we go. Oh my God, there it is.
There it is, right in the middle action. So that's how I wanted to start.
I am.
How funny is that?
So there might be other spellings, but there you go.
Oh, so tell me about Icefall. What's it about? Tell everyone what's it about. Why did you pick it up?
Which I wrote in collaboration with Mike Newman, and he had, the original idea was his, and it came about because I read the original book, the original idea, and I loved the idea. I didn't love the book, but I saw in the book a book I'd always wanted to write, because what do I like to write? Things I love to watch or read. 2 of my favorite movies, sci-fi horror, Aliens, the second one, and The Thing, the John Carpenter film, The Thing. 2 of the great in that genre. I saw an opportunity to write with Mike our version of The Thing. But of course, in our book, in Icefall, there's millions of those things running around, of things, monsters. What is it about? 9 super beings who have been on Earth waiting for something like an alien invasion, who have been placed here by another world, are all that can save the Earth from annihilation at the hands of these alien creatures that have been buried in the ice in Alaska for hundreds of thousands of years, a la The Thing, until climate change thaws them out and unleashes them on humanity. It's basically, here's the interesting thing about Icefall for the writers and readers out there. Icefall is basically one long scene. It's one long, yet yes, you go different places, you have different POVs, but it's so connected, there's no time to breathe. You know,
It moves. Yeah.
so I've never written a book that was more organic or came more naturally to me. The action scenes, and if I'm good at anything, and maybe I'm not good at that much really, as far as skill, but I write great action scenes. Icefall has 5. Each one is bigger than the one before. Because that's the thing. No pun intended. When you're an action writer, and this is true of the James Bond movies, every action scene has to be bigger than the one before. They have to build. You never
Built
want
to something
to
bigger and
open
bigger.
with your best. Yes, you can put your biggest scene in the middle or 2/3 of the way through, and then the story can take another direction. But I pride myself more than anything. I pride myself on a lot of things, character development, emotions, but my action scenes are my lifeblood. And these are the best action scenes I've ever written. And you know why? I felt like a kid again, Don, because I had never written alien like battles like this, like these huge, kind of like. And I'll tell you, the great thing, I can remember the final season of Game of Thrones, and I remember the Long Night, episode 3 of the 8 that they finished the last year with. To me, it was the greatest 90 minutes of television in history because it lived up to the expectations that the producers and writers had set 8 years before, 8 seasons before. And I felt watching that like I was the same kid, Don, watching that 90 minutes as I was when I went with my parents to see the original Jason and the Argonauts at the age of 6. That's what great reading, great movie making. I would imagine great music, but I'm not a music guy. But I'll stick to movies and TV and TV and books. The mark of when something that speaks to you and makes you feel like a kid again, as interested and absorbed and hooked. I'm that way with House of the Dragon now. I just finished the second of Your Friends and Neighbors. I'm in the middle of second season of Landman, and they're all different in their own ways. And yes, sure, Game of Thrones. The amazing thing about the original Game of Thrones, and this is a point about storytelling, a bunch of guys, adult men at the gym, talking about dragons and what was coming next week. Is that brilliant storytelling?
That's amazing.
I don't
Absolutely.
think guys at the gym talking about my Caitlin Strong books. I hope they're talking about Icefall. They should be, but not like they're talking about Game of.
That's a whole other thing. It's a whole rabbit hole I go down being like, when I was a kid, I went to a lot of Star Trek conventions in New York, and I'm wanting to sell my book this in a couple of weeks. But, all these people get dressed up, get made fun of. And then, I go to a sports game and there's these the gym guys, and they're wearing, players' names on their backs. And I'm like, this is just your version of Star Trek conventions. You're just as much of a nerd as we were. You dress up just differently.
And you know what? Such a great point you just made, because those guys, those characters who are role playing, who are inhabiting a character. That's what I'm doing when I'm writing. That's when I'm getting into the heads of my characters and I'm writing those scenes. I'm role playing. I'm not writing, and this is vital. I'm not writing from the outside in. I'm writing for the inside out. What did you want to say?
No, I love that, and I agree with that. I think just because you brought up that Long Night Game of Thrones episode, and I don't know if there's a connection to writing here, but I'm with you that I thought it was a good payoff that hour and a half. However, I think they made a mistake that people often make. Right, a lot of criticism of that show when it aired was that it was too dark because the cinematographer wanted it to be really low. Yeah, you see, you loved it. That's great. As a filmmaker, I was like, I don't know if I liked it or didn't like it, but it distracted me because I was thinking about it. I'm like, why do they choose to expose everything that way? And because of that, I was thinking about that maybe 5% of the time. That took me out of the story. And I think tradespeople, we all have this habit of, I want to try something that's new or different or unique to stand out. and without thinking about how it really helps for the story. It's like, I saw something actually yesterday where there's a picture or something about a movie, and someone said to me, "Why is that person's face lit? How is that motivated from the scene?" And the guy was like, "Well, it needed to be seen so you could hear the music track or something like that." So like, obviously we're artificially creating things for people to consume, in that case a film or a TV show, whatever it was. So in that case, I think that was a little bit of a mistake. I don't know if there's a parallel to writing a novel here,
There,
but that stood out to me.
David Fincher, when he made Seven, one of the scariest. People ask me what's your favorite horror movie of all time, and I'll say Seven, because it so unsettles me every time I watch it that even though there's no there is a monster, but he's human. Fincher purposely made the dialogue soft. Why? So the audience would lean forward. That's manipulative. No different than Hitchcock when he created Dolly Back and all the techniques of film that he mastered and invented. A writer does that manipulation by what they allow you to see. So enough.
Holding information. Yeah.
I write high concept thrillers. So the opening scene is always going to give you something that grabs your attention. It's manipulative. And you may not get back there for a while to what is buried in the desert. Everything comes back to what what was stolen. How was the impossible murder? The murders in the Rue Morgue, Edgar Allan Poe, the locked room murder. Something impossible that you're later going to see and you're going to make it possible. It's manipulative, just like my cliffhanger chapter and endings and my setups at the beginning of every chapter. My goal when you read a book like Icefall is you start reading it and you don't stop until you fall asleep. God help me, no. Or your train gets going, or you just say, I've got to savor this. I'm only going to read 100 pages.
Now there's the story and the experience, but then there's getting your work to an audience. So, I guess what advice do you have? And I'm being very selfish by asking this, but like, what advice do you have? And what's been your experience about how you actually find your audience and get the book or the art that you create to that audience? Because it's very hard now. There's gatekeepers and there's a lot of content.
You're on a roll today with great questions. Great questions. I don't comment on stuff like that often enough. And the bottom line is a lot harder than it used to be. I started publishing in the golden age of mass market paperback. The month I came out, Don, every single bookstore in every mall in the country, every drugstore, every supermarket, every airport, for 30 days, my book was there. And people would walk by the front of Walden Books, may it rest in peace, 5,000 mall stores, all gone. And they would say, "Oh, I like that cover. Let me check that author out." I've discovered almost every one of my favorite authors accidentally in stores like that. From Stephen King to Robert Ludlum to Lee Child to James Hall. James Lee Burke, just from browsing. What am I getting at? Mass market died. A lot of my career died with it, which opened up new doors for me. But I don't know anymore, with the loss of mass market, how new authors get discovered. Amazon is a destination place. 99% of people who go to Amazon know what they're going to buy. And then you see, well, if you like this, buy this. If, there'll be sponsored ads. And some people, you don't browse. Who browses on Amazon looking for the next great author? So
right.
This puts the pressure on writers because they have to be, if you're going to get into this business, You've got to be a marketing expert as much as a great writer, because you've got to figure out how to get yourself. Because for every one hit that a publisher makes, they fail 10 times. 10 times they try to make a book a hit and it dies, or the second one fails. Even big time authors, you know what puts them on the New York Times bestseller list? Their pre-sale orders on Amazon.
Right.
They generate these huge pre-sales, but that no one is discovering them. I discovered Lee Child when he was already big, but he wasn't big to me because I didn't know him. How would I discover Lee Child today other than the fact that he's got a TV show for Reacher? You know, how did I discover one of my closest writer friends, David Morrell, Brotherhood of the Rose, Fraternity of the Stone, some of the best thrillers ever written, paperbacks, in spindles, dump displays,
Yep.
and
All the
on.
chore books I used to read. Yeah. I mean, that issue is also apparent, with my friends out in LA and Hollywood, because not only is it hard to get content seen, but now the big players, of which there are fewer and fewer, they want you to be packaged with your own audience. You have to have a social following of millions. You have to have everything good to go, and then you get the support, and then you get the push forward. So I think it's challenging for everyone, whether they're writers for novels or writers for screenplays, right?
And yet, for every once in a while, more often than we would think, there's an obsession. 750,000 to make. It's over 150 million gross right now. The Blair Witch Project, John Carpenter's Halloween. I mean, the scary thing about the film business today, that more so the book business isn't that scary. Books are still being published, more books than ever. But how would you get The Usual Suspects made today? How would you get The Godfather made today? Jaws would suck today because it would be mid. It would just be special effects and giant eating sharks instead of the byplay of the characters. That what makes Jaws, to me, my favorite movie of all time, but not the best movie of all time, but still my favorite, is
Your favorite, yeah.
Because what I said before, let's go back to what I said about the imagination. Our imaginations never age. They never grow. We stay kids in our imaginations, right? Okay. Well, the worst thing you can do for someone's imagination is to show them too much of the monster. Because now it's like, oh, I thought it's it. I would be, Stephen King is my favorite author. But his books are so goddamn great. I'm trying to avoid bad words. His book is so great. So much buildup. But sometimes the ending is such a letdown. It let me down. The Outsider, which was I could not stop reading, let me down. Because the books are so good. He doesn't always know how to pay it off. And that's Stephen King, the greatest storyteller in the world,
Right.
maybe
He's
ever.
got the journey down, but the destination. But I think if the journey is so good, it's so hard to have that fulfilling end for anybody, because you don't want the journey to end, and you want it, like, there's no way a story could end as good as if that journey is so solid. So I think it's inherently gonna not please someone. But I completely understand that. I think that's something that happens all the time. It's always like there's that thought phrase. I don't know who even talked about it, but when you go to a movie and everything gets dark, that's the best part of a movie before anything's happened, because the anticipation is, or like if you're an actor and you go on stage, and I wrote this into one of my films, that moment when the lights go dark and the spotlight shines on the actor, that's the moment where everyone comes alive, and everything else is a disappointment.
Film, when people went to the movies all the time and there was no cable and there was no internet, when I grew up, and even into the 70s and 80s, and part of the 90s, well, it was a competition between which movie you would see. So in a movie like Wait Until Dark, the gimmick was they turned all the lights off, even the exit sign lights, at the end of the movie. So you were in the world of Audrey Hepburn in Wait Until Dark. Faced an incredible challenge when he made the classic Psycho. Why? Because the main build character, the number one actress in the movie, Janet Leigh, dies. Many people think it's 10 minutes, 15, 20. It was halfway through. Halfway, the exact halfway point of the movie is when she dies. But back then, people used to go to the movies a different way. They would just show up and go in to see the film. They'd watch the end first, and then they'd stay for the beginning. So Hitchcock said, if they get here late, my star is gone. What am I going to do? So he came up with a marketing campaign that no one would be seated in the theater after the movie had begun. That created lines around the block, and one of the urban, this is probably an urban legend, but that's where the term blockbuster came from.
No way.
Psych.
Gotta look that up. I did not know that. Can you imagine trying to implement that now? The movie theaters would be like, no way, we got to sell our junk food and all that. It's so funny.
A different reason.
Yeah. So interesting. Well, I so appreciate your time. Before we go, you're around 70 books. When do we hit 100? And what dozen books are you currently working on? What are you working on right now?
I probably have to hit 100 or at least 90, 85, because I write so many books. I've got 3 books out in the last 6 months, just the way it fell. All different genres, memoir, because I think if you know your story, it doesn't matter what you write. You just know it's a story. So I'm not thinking of 100. I'm thinking of 71. I'm thinking of the one I'm working on now, or the one I'm finishing now and the one I'm about to start. Writing is a marathon. When you don't think about the next book, the next 10 books, you think about the one that you're working on. The same thing is true when you're writing a book. As a non-outliner, I'm not worried about chapter 70 when I start. I'm worried about chapter 1 going into chapter 2. Just like when you run a marathon. You're thinking about 1 mile at a time, not 26 miles. And that's the way a writer's career is. And like a marathon, there are hills and you're straining up, and then sometimes you get lucky and you go down, but there's always that rise again. Anybody who wants to go into this business, it's a roller coaster. And you have ups and you have downs. That's the challenge, and it's also the fun.
Well, Jon Land, thank you so much for your time. It was really great to talk with you. That's it for this away mission. Thanks to our guest and to all of you for watching and listening. Please subscribe on all the platforms, and you can email us at nowin-scenario-podcast@gmail.com. Trevor will return, I promise you. But in the meantime, I think we're thriving just fine without his supervision and snark. See you next time.